Hello everyone, I'm Sylvia from Fairlight Tarot. Welcome to my channel and welcome to Tarot versus Mercury retrograde, a survival guide. So I've been planning this video for a while now and I was hesitant to post it because during the years I found that when we don't know that it's Mercury retrograde, it's not that things don't happen, things still happen. But we kind of have a different perspective on them and we tend probably not even to notice them as much. And that's probably just me, but when I have one of the usual mishaps that happen during Mercury retrogrades, I kind of get really more upset because I know that it's Mercury retrograde. Does it make sense? Maybe it's just me, but it's just that I get really upset because I kind of expect things to go in a certain way, and when they actually do, I lose it. And so during the years I found that whenever I knew that something was coming up, I wasn't even telling my friends because I didn't want them to go through the expectations, you know, knowing that Mercury was going to go retrograde for 3.5 weeks. And when it does, you kind of dread the outcomes of stuff. And but in any case, I decided to go ahead because I've seen heaps of posts on Instagram, and there's videos already on YouTube on you know, this second Mercury retrograde in the year, because the first one was, we inherited that from the last couple of days of December 2022, and then you know, it bridged over into 2023 in January. So this is the second one of the year. Unfortunately, it is going to affect air sign more than other zodiac sign, and I'm an Aquarius, so obviously I'm going to be affected more. And true story, this morning, so for me, I'm filming this on the Friday. I woke up this morning, the first thing I saw was an email from an Etsy seller telling me that, but also a very unpleasant email. To be honest with you, I would have reacted in a different way if things had been worded in a different way. So basically, a deck that I bought yesterday, turns out that the shipping cost that I already paid for, $42, that was not enough to cover all the shipping costs. And do I have any idea on how to cover the difference? And my answer was, you know what, just, it's Mercury retrograde, just keep the order, cancel the order, and just issue a full refund. I really don't have the energy to deal with this. And so I thought to myself, I really should film this video and I should post it, because there's going to be other people out there in the same situation. And there's a couple of things that I do with tarot in order to support myself for the next 3.5 weeks. So it just gonna go away on the 14th of May. So let's have a look. There's 4 things that we need to pay attention to, we need to be mindful of during these 3.5 weeks. So first of all, what does Mercury retrograde bring into our lives? So Mercury is a planet that governs technology and communication, and it's controlling the way we transmit and receive messages from others. So don't forget that, technology and communication. So as you can imagine, any communication through technology is going to be completely messed up. And as I said before, it's going to be felt even more by air signs. So what I'm thinking is that we need to focus on these 2 aspects and have a look at what we can do in order to survive in the best possible way, if not thrive, in the next 3.5 weeks. So first of all, we need to stay present in our interactions. It means that we cannot do anything, we cannot leave anything to chance. We need to really be intentionally grounded in such a way that everything we do in our interactions is well thought out. Okay, so these are the next 3 decks will be decks for grounding. Decks for groundings, to me, the first one that comes to mind is the Foragers Daughter Tarot, because it's a very earthy kind of deck. This is the Afterlife edition. the one with the cream color borders. It's my favorite. I really enjoy this deck, and trust me, it's one of those decks that really do bring a lot of grounding energy, a lot of balance to your readings, but also if you use it in your personal practice, it's really excellent. And as you can see, it's got references to the plant world, it's got references to the animal world. It's a beautiful deck. It has got that calming, soothing kind of effect. You know, even a card with the Three of Swords, the fact that there's a bird that has been pierced by three swords is not necessarily the way I would have liked to see the Three of Swords, but it's still better than a heart, a pierced heart. So it's not a numerological deck. It's a rather peepish deck, I would say, but it's got illustrations from the plant world and the animal world, and I do believe that it refers back to some kind of an RWS interpretation of the system, of the cards. So if you look at the Five of Cups, for example, it does still show you the loss on the 3 broken cups, or the Eight of Swords is still a trapped animal. So it's not a pip deck, it's a pipish deck, or let's say it's semi-illustrated. It does have some illustrations, but perhaps not fully illustrated. It also depends on the cards, of course. But this deck is excellent for grounding, absolutely excellent for, finding that kind of connection that we all have with Mother Earth. And we really need to get back to that, because Mercury retrograde is going to lift us off the ground, and not in a good way. So this is the Foragers Daughter Tarot. And the second deck that I really enjoy using for grounding myself is the Jonas Tarot. This is the 7th edition. It's the newest edition. I received this deck probably a couple of weeks ago. It has not left my desk. It's an absolute joy to be worked with. It's an absolute joy to look at the cards, the colors. So if you're not familiar, Jonas is from Galicia. Local capital Galicia is A Coruña. So her language is a Gallego. And this is the language that you can find on the titles of the cards. That's not Spanish, it's not Portuguese, and it's not a Spanish dialect. It's an actual language, and it's called Gallego. So Galicia is a very beautiful land, but it's also a land where you're asked to feel that connection with Mother Earth more than in other places. If you've never been there, I used to go there all the time because I had clients in that area. And I was sitting in a passenger seat in the car, and I was just in awe of the landscape around me whenever they were taking me to places. And this deck reflects all that. It's absolutely beautiful. So what she does is each and every edition, she actually changes something, whether it's referred to the size of the deck, the shape of the cards, or perhaps the combination of colors. So this is the 7th edition, but there will be differences throughout all of the editions. And this is definitely my favorite card, is the Emperor card. I really love the melancholic abandonment of this card. To me, it represents a person that has been vested with so much power that it's just necessarily alone, because there's no one that he can trust anymore. It's a kind of a dark side of the Emperor that not everyone sees in the card. I do. I tend to see that kind of a dark, shadowy aspect of it. The aloneness of the power, the fact that no one can really understand why you're doing the things you're doing, and you're doing them, you knew these things for them, but because no one understands, you kind of have to take a step away. And that brings sadness with it, because no man should be an island, and yet men with a lot of power, men and women, obviously I refer to men without gender, are necessarily on their own. So I really love all of these cards. It's just, you know, that the Emperor is my favorite, but every time I look at this deck, I just gush over it because it's just so beautiful. I have the 5th edition as well. I am forever looking for the 6th edition, which I think is the jumbo one, so the really big cards. Mind you, I already feel like this one is too big for my hands because I can't really find the proper way to shuffle this deck. It doesn't stop me from using it. I find my way around it. It's okay. But I think that a jumbo would be almost impossible. But it doesn't matter because I like it so much that even if I had to shuffle them by putting them down face down and just, you know, moving piles on top, stacking them, I wouldn't mind. So this is the Jonas Tarot 7th edition, or as I call it, the JJ7. And it's an excellent deck for grounding. Now the next deck that I want to show you for grounding is probably a deck that everyone uses for this purpose, and it's the Gentle Tarot. This is the 1st edition. I think this deck doesn't need any kind of introduction because many people will have this deck. If you don't have this deck, you probably know of this deck. To me, it's the gentle, it's a gentle tarot, not just because it says so in the title, but because it actually is. It's the kind of deck that, you know, it doesn't cover the truth. It still tells you the truth, but in such a way that it doesn't hurt you. And so obviously it's not confrontational. There are no confrontational cards. There are soothing cards. There are cards that, you know, it feels like a hug to you. Even the 6 of Thunder in this case is the 6 of Swords. And as you know, the 6 of Swords is the kind of, it's the essence of sadness because you're embarking upon a journey that you didn't necessarily want to take in the first place, but you know you have to. You have been forced by your circumstances. Maybe something really sad happened to you. And you have to jump into this boat, and there's choppy waters all around, and the person who's guiding this boat doesn't really care about you. And in some decks you're on your own, in other decks there's a figure next to you, a smaller figure, so it's even sadder because in a way not only you have to take this trip, but you're also responsible for someone else. So someone else is going through this with you, but is sharing in the sadness, but you know that you're going through this to go to a better place. That would be a confrontational way to look at the 6 of Swords, and it's traditional. But this 6 of Swords is amazing because there's this highlighting of the good element of the 6 of Swords with the rainbow here and the really big light that is coming towards you. It looks as if, you know, there is this sense of movement and you're riding a whale, and that in itself, it's a wonderful thing to think about. Not that you possibly could be riding a whale, but it's the sense of being one with such a majestic creature that in a way probably gives you that kind of solace that you need in order to be able to make it through to the other side. So this is what this deck is doing for you. And it's definitely a grounding deck. It's definitely an earthy kind of deck, not just for the elements that are represented as symbols, but also for the color palette, for example. It also, I don't know whether you understand what I mean, but it's also the tactile feel to it. So this deck is very friendly. You know, when you use it, it doesn't have that kind of gilding. It's a really beautiful gold, but it's a matte gold gilding, so it's not that kind of abrasive gilding that hurts your fingers. It's the kind of, and even the cardstock it's very easy to fan out. The cards, they don't get stuck one to the other, but it's also not slippery, so it's not glossy, so they don't run away from you. You don't have to, you know, hike around the house to just pick them up when you shuffle. So it's the perfect deck when it comes to this kind of approach. It's very inviting. It's inviting for you to actually use it. And I definitely, if you do have this deck, I definitely recommend using it in the next 3 weeks, because it will be grounding you. So just to summarize, one thing that we really need to do is to stay present in our interactions, and we need to do our utmost to be grounded. So another really important thing that we need to do in the next 3 weeks is to think before we speak or even text. And in order to do that, I believe that we need to be mindful, we need to be conscious. So presence of mind is one of the most important thing, and not just during Mercury retrograde. I think it's something that we always need to have. It's a practice that always needs to be part of our daily rituals. You know, being mindful of what we're saying in order not to hurt others, in order not to hurt ourselves. And when it comes to the disconnect during Mercury retrograde, it needs to be even stronger, this sense of mindfulness on when we communicate with others. So how do we achieve that? How do we get to that level of mindfulness when we talk? Well, first of all, I think that the most important thing is to create that kind of environment in which we are, that kind of environment that is conducive of mindfulness. I'm really into essential oils lately, so I really appreciate and like this deck. It's the Essential Oils Healing deck. It's a mass market deck. It's a very affordable price. Well, I got it from Amazon. What I really like about this deck is that it's got a lot of cards. I think it's 52 cards. It's glossy, but it's not that kind of gloss that, you know, it's not the mystical moments kind of glossy. The artwork is spectacular, but I'll show you later. The first thing that I wanted to show you is the guidebook, which is very helpful. So if we take one example, the fennel. So obviously you have the English name, you have the Latin name, and then, you know, it does tell you also on the cards, it does tell you a couple of things that you can use this particular oil for. So in the case of the fennel, for example, it encourages communication and self-expression. I cannot believe that I picked this. I kid you not, it was not done on purpose. So obviously, when you need to be mindful about communication, fennel is a really good essential oil to use, because apparently it encourages communication and self-expression. So it gives you a couple of symbols in this case. What do they mean? This one, I don't know if you can, okay, maybe it's better this way. You can use this oil in a diffuser. You can use this oil for massage, and you can also use this oil as a supplement, let's say. So then it gives you a bit of the idea of where this oil came from, what it has been used for in the past. It gives you an idea of how to use it and why. And then it also gives you a more specific idea of what to use it for. So fennel is good for all of these things. Obviously, all this is tapping into the ancient wisdom on how to use plants around us. So in absence of medication, of synthetic medication, what can we do in order to cure ourselves? And this is amazing. It's a very interesting way to approach a natural way of healing ourselves. So that's why it's called the Essential Oil Healing deck. I really, really like it. So as I was mentioning, I absolutely love the colors. I love the artwork. I love the fact that even, for example, this card reminds me so much of the Witch's Wisdom, the artwork in the Witch's Wisdom Tarot, that I try and pair them up together, and it's just a match made in heaven. But this deck can also be paired up with a lot of other decks, because it's got that kind of really beautiful color palette and artwork. As you can see, there's always the drawing of the plant or flower that gives this oil. There's the English name, the Latin name, and then whatever you can find on the guidebook, it actually summarizes it. So fortifies, cedarwood fortifies and strengthens. And then with these icons, it tells you that you can use it in a diffuser or as a massage. I really recommend this deck. As I said, it's very affordable. This deck is absolutely amazing to create a kind of an environment that is conducive of being mindful of what you're going to say, what you're going to say. And it's not just about speaking with your voice, it's also about texting or sending messages, okay? So I just wanted to make sure. As you can imagine, because Mercury is, governing technology and communication, it's all about emails and text messages and WhatsApp messages and what have you. So this is the Essential Oils Healing Deck. The next deck that I want to show you that is also conducive of a kind of a very mindful environment is the Sea Soul Journeys Oracle cards. And this deck is also mass market, also very affordable. It's got 48 cards and a very nice guidebook. It's in black and white, which, it doesn't tell you much in black and white, but when you'll have a look at the deck, you'll understand. It is a deck that is absolutely full of colors. It's amazing. And it's, as you can imagine, it's all photos that have been taken in and around body of water. I love this deck. It's beautiful. It's to me, it's very calming. It's got a very calming and soothing effect because that's the effect of the water on my psyche and on my intuition. I like the fact that it's got a very nice keyword, very big. So if you have problems with eyesight, you don't have any problem reading this. And then it's got a sentence at the bottom, and it's actually a kind of a wish. It's a blessing. So for example, this card says alive as a keyword, and then it says, may you delight in vitality, which is amazing. So each and every card has got that. Bliss says, may you feel deeply and transcend. Imagine says, may you look beyond what can be seen. As you can imagine, this deck promotes also that kind of meditation practice that you can use whenever you need to be grounded and also feel mindful. And it's just gorgeous. I remember hesitating in buying this deck because I had watched a YouTube walkthrough of this deck, and the person on the channel was saying that it's a bit of a rip-off because you just need a good camera and to live by the sea, and you just go and take photos and then you slap some sentence on it. And I thought to myself, well, all photographic decks are like that. I mean, if you really want to go to the nitty-gritty way in which to produce a deck, but it does take that mastery in order to be able to do something like that. And to be honest, these sentences are actually really good. It's not just something that comes out of, yeah, okay, ray of light, no, oh, it says, oh, why? Because we actually look at this ray of light and that's what we feel. We feel in awe of what we're seeing. May you see the sublime in the everyday. This really resonates with me because I do need to feel the sublime in the everyday, because otherwise, what are we? What are we going to do? If all we see is just the ordinary, that doesn't help now, does it? So this is definitely a deck that I recommend to create that kind of environment that is conducive of mindfulness. So this was the Sea Soul Journeys Oracle deck. And then absolutely something that is more practical is the Spirit Speak Tarot, because as I said, during this retrograde, we need to be mindful of how we communicate. So the Spirit Speak, to me, is a very it's a deck that encourages you to be direct. I definitely recommend this because when we are not being direct, when we're trying to circle around the bush in order to say something, that's where we make mistakes. That's where misunderstandings occur. So don't necessarily be brazen, don't necessarily be disrespectful. It's quite the opposite that we need to be. However, do try and be direct when you're communicating. So simple sentences, but something that actually is effective in communication, because that's something that we really need. That's something that, and trust me, we won't have the energy to be argumentative. I feel already depleted, and it's just the first day of retrograde, and I'm already really exhausted. It's just something that we have to put up with. And I was talking to a dear friend yesterday. She was already feeling the effect of the retrograde, and I was trying my best to cheer her up and to say something comforting, and I just couldn't resist, and I brought up a couple of tarot decks. I told her, oh, I'm looking at this and I really like it, and I'm looking at that and I really like it. And, you know, even the smaller things can cheer someone up. And I was being very mindful of what I was saying. In some cases, I feel that when we communicate, we always try and find a shortcut to give out a message. But in my case, because I love languages, I have a passion for neurolinguistics. And I always try to communicate in someone's language, someone's own native language. To me, communication is extremely important. I really need to get my message out there in such a way that people will understand me. And, you know, and I was thinking, don't look for shortcuts. This is a very important person in my life, and she was feeling blue. And I was thinking, be very mindful of what you're saying. If you feel that a concept is not thoroughly explained, then explain it in 3 or 4 different ways, but it needs to be understood, because I really wanted this person to feel better. And so, you know, I found myself thinking back and thinking, well, I probably repeat myself, but it doesn't matter. Repetition helps. It's when you hear a concept being repeated 3 or 4 times that you actually grasp it. And on top of everything, I don't want to be dismissive of people. I don't want to just jump to conclusion and assume that I explained something in such a great way that everyone understood me. So to me, it's just also an act of being humble and recognizing that sometimes what I say perhaps may not be understood. So I need to say it in different ways. This was the spirit speak. What we've seen these last 3 decks were in order to establish an environment around us that is conducive of mindfulness, because we need to be very mindful of what we're saying when we communicate with others. So another thing that we need to do, that I encourage you to do for the next 3.5 weeks, in order to face this retrograde, is to reinvent ourselves and look at things through a different lens, from a different perspective. Why? Because we need to expect things to go wrong. There's no good way to say that. Unfortunately, there will be misunderstandings, there will be mishaps, there will be a lot of disconnect. And what we need to do is we need to have a plan B. We need to have a plan B for the important things. I know that it sounds exhausting, because we are all busy. We already have a million things to do. And obviously we want to go from point A to point B in the shortest possible time. But sometimes we need to think that perhaps the way in which we want to reach from A to B may not work. And so we'll have to go through C or D or E, etc. So reinvent yourself, think of a plan B, think of something different to do if the thing that you wanted to do originally does not pan out. When I think of this, and I wanted to find 3 decks to give you that possibility, the first one that came to mind, without even thinking too much about it, is the Lorenzi Tarot by Irene Lorenzi. I think this is US Games. So, yeah, it's a US Games deck. Now this one, compared to the others, to be honest, it's not that cheap. Perhaps because the production value is exceptional. The box is really beautiful. The booklet is really nice as well. You know, it's really beautiful images. These are the images that are on the cards as well. You don't have a lot when it comes to description. It does describe the person or the refiguration in the card. It does give you the meanings and the reverse meanings, but that's about it. This is a deck that I posted a couple of times on Instagram, and I received a lot of different comments, a lot of them visceral, because it does display some kind of elements that require a visceral reaction from the viewer or, you know, the tarot reader, the practitioner. So I wouldn't call it confrontational, because to me it's actually quite the opposite. It's a deck that encourages you to take a different perspective. So you will see that there's cards. Well, not necessarily the Three of Swords, because it does have the traditional depiction. But there you go. For example, if we look at the Nine of Wands, this is not the traditional depiction of the Nine of Wands. I mean, the Nine of Wands talk about resilience, right? The last bit is really, you've done so much, you've been through so much, you're exhausted, but guess what? You still have one last bit to go through, and then you'll be fine. And, you know, if you know tarot, ironically, you know that even telling someone that pulls the Nine of Wands, telling them that's the last, just one last piece, come on, and then knowing that the actually completion of the suit of the wands arrives with the Ten of Wands, which is, it tells you that you're actually taking on too much. So I don't know about you, but every time that I tell someone it's the Nine of Wands, you need to be resilient, automatically in my head I go, yeah, but if you need to be careful not to take on too much, because then, you know, the next card is the Ten of Wands. So going back to this deck, this is not the traditional way to paint that card, but it does make you think, doesn't it? It's all of this deck will have the same effect on you. It makes you think. It's not traditional. It's not just not traditional in the sense that it does not refer to the elements or the symbols of the RWS, but it's also the kind of art style is a bit out there, is a bit different. It's a bit different in the sense that it asks you to take on a different perspective. So if we look at this star card expresses hope in such a really strong way, because you're up to your waist in water, and you're also not 100%, there is not 100% of you in the water trying to make your way through it. You're missing a bit. You can definitely tell that here. And there's threats, there's something that goes on in the water that you cannot even see. However, there's also the idea that what you're doing right now, you're actually doing in the right direction. There's this background that shows you these are the electricity pylons with the electricity cables, and that represents the connection. So there is a connection, there is a continuity, and you come from here and you go in towards there. That's the sense of direction. You go towards the future. There is the kind of hope that what you're doing right now is for your own good. You are on the right path. You need to go through with it. So what I do like about this deck is that there's also a kind of, not in all of the cards to be honest, but in many of the majors, there's a bit of a sentence that, to be honest with you, I'm using my reading glasses right now, and I'm also looking through a lens. So it says, nothing is as it seems. And it reflects the difference between what's above the surface of the water and what's beneath the surface of the water. So to me, it's an indication to think about the as above and the so below. And the fact that, we can actually look at things from a different perspective, which is exactly what we need to do, as I said, in the next 3.5 weeks. So if we need to do something, we need to have a plan B. We need to look at the best way to go from A to B, but not necessarily in a straight line. Sometimes we have to go through B, C, D, etc. I don't know whether you like this deck or not, but to me it's actually a very beautiful deck. There are some cards that might be on the darker side, which is fine. If you watch my channel, you know that one of my favorite decks is the Mother of Crows, which is a lot darker than this. And I don't mind. It's also because I live in Australia, so in the southern hemisphere right now we're going towards winter. So obviously we're going towards the darker months, which is ironic because I always make sure never to be here. In the heart of winter, I always go to the northern hemisphere to just find back the sun, because I'm basically a plant. I need water and sunlight. But this deck is really beautiful to invite you to consider an alternative option, an alternative way to go from A to B, which is something that we really need at this time of the year. So another deck that I really feel will give you that kind of possibility to reinvent yourself is the Serpent Fire Tarot by Divine Wolf. This is the 7th edition, and I think that she made it clear that she has no intention of reprinting. Fair enough. This is a deck that is quite cosmic to me, although it does have that kind of let's say the desert feel to it of other decks. I'm thinking about the Desert Wilds, for example. It's very similar to this one, but because of the elements of you do see a lot of planets in this deck, almost every card, I'd say. So it does have that kind of cosmic feel to it. What I like about this is that it's got both. It's got that sense of introspection into your own intuition. This is an excellent card to show that. But also through the third eye, let's say, it actually asks you to look at things from the outside. So look inward to see how things look from the outside as well. So that's how that's how I see this deck as helping you to reinvent yourself, to see things through a different kind of lens, in a different perspective. It's a very beautiful deck. It's a fiery deck because of the color palette, but also because of the power, the electricity, the energy that comes out of the cards. Definitely a deck that I will use in order to be conducive of that, finding that alternative, different way of looking at things, going through all of the doors and find a different outcome. So this is the Serpent Fire Tarot. And the last tarot that I want to show you in this, let's say, not category, but in order to be mindful and in order to reinvent ourselves and looking at things through a different kind of lens, is the New Moon Tarot. This is a recent acquisition in my collection. This is a really beautiful deck. I think the artist is Canadian. This is a really beautiful peepish deck. I really, really love the peeps, the minors. Look at this, 10 of Pentacles is absolutely glorious. I love the idea of associating Pentacles with the butterflies, because butterflies is generally something that will point out to an element of air, you know, because they fly. But it's, and the suit of Pentacles is the suit of the earth, so obviously not the same element. However, I do like this association because in a way, it asks you to look at things in a different way. Why would a butterfly be the symbol of the element of earth? Because the butterfly asks you to reconnect to nature. And I really do appreciate that in a deck, you know, the possibility to look at things in a different way. And another thing that to me is different, so it looks at things in a different way, from a different perspective, is using crystals for the suit of wands. So obviously these are crystal wands, so that's why these are used for the suit of wands. However, crystals to me, because they are rocks, basically, they have this very strong sense of the element of earth, and I would definitely associate crystals with the suit of pentacles rather than the suit of wands. But that's why I like it, because, you know, it asks you to look at things from a different perspective. It's a beautiful deck. It's got a beautiful artwork, beautiful cardstock. It's a bit slippery, as you can see, so it's a bit glossy. I like the concept behind it. I don't see it much, you know, in social media. I don't know why. It's probably not a famous deck, and I think it's a fairly recent publication, but I really do appreciate it. So this is the New Moon Tarot, and these were the decks that I use in order to be at peace with the fact that things may go wrong and I will have to find a different way to do them. So the last recommendation that I have in order to survive this Mercury retrograde is to understand something very basic but extremely important that I don't actually hear very often when, you know, I hear people talking about Mercury. Mercury retrograde is not about making new mistakes. That could be a consequence, but the actual essence of Mercury retrograde is to show you, to point out at mistakes you've actually already made. So it may be something that you've done in the last couple of months that was not entirely mindful, and that actually this comes back to you. It comes back to you during these 3 weeks, and there will be no way out of that. You will have to face those mistakes. You will have to face any time you've been not communicating properly, any time in which your messages didn't get through in such a way that then there will be a domino effect, and the results of this domino effect, you will see them now. So one deck that helps me accept that and helps me also try and find a solution to that is the Energy Archaeology Oracle deck. Why? Because, so if you're familiar, or even if you're not familiar with this deck helps you understand that any kind of trauma that we experience actually preserves the memory of it into our bones. So our body shows the sign of everything we've been through, which is a very poetic concept, but it's also a very painful one, in the sense that every single time that we've fallen down, our knees actually bear the brunt of that fall. And that goes from the physical realm into the spiritual realm, in the sense that obviously that fall represents a lack of confidence that we may have in the future. So this deck will show you exactly where to focus on with the healing on your body in order to overcome whatever consequences there were, or there still are, because of those traumas. It's a beautiful deck. I really love the artwork. The color palette is kind of pastel. It's very soothing, very kind, but it does tell you where to look. And every time that I use this deck, and every time that I hear someone has been using this deck, I get very emotional, and everyone does, because it's it never misses a bit. Like, it's just really spot on, 100%. And especially if you use it in combination with the guidebook is very important to use this deck, because even though there are keywords and there are references to the anatomical part of the body that is shown in the card, the meaning of the card is not necessarily easy to grasp, so you will need the guidebook for that. And other than that, I also recommend reading the guidebook for this deck, because it also gives you a kind of a recommendation on how to heal the part of the body and the mind and the soul that has been broken or damaged by the trauma. So this is the Energy Archaeology Oracle deck. The second deck that I use in order to help me accept that there will be mistakes that I've done in the past that will come back, but not this time out on a physical level, but on a mindful level, is the Soma Tarot. Because this to me is by far the deck that invites me to look at my mind, to connect with my mind, and the way in which the mind retains those that were traumas that I experienced in my bones. So as I was saying before, the knees will bear the brunt of the fall, in the sense that will be scraped, but it's my mind that loses confidence, not actually my knees. So this deck is one of my favorite decks. I actually, when I was filming my Tarot Academy Awards, I gave it the Oscar for Best Photography. It's a photographic deck, obviously. Being a photographer, having been a photographer myself, I know what goes behind an image like that. You know, where do you set the horizon, where the light is coming from. It's such a beautiful, well, this is my favorite card by far of the deck. It's the Star card. It's so beautiful because of, again, there is that sense of hope, that you come from the darkness and you ascend and you reach the top, and you know that what is in front of you gives you hope, because it's going to heal you. It's going to be something finally positive. I really, really love this deck. I love all about it. It's even the cardstock is one of my favorite ones, because it's that kind of buttery that it means that it fans out really well. It's really kind to the touch. The size for my hands is a bit too big, but that's just me because I've got small hands. But other than that, you know, it's such a beautiful deck. And it's also the guidebook. So you do have a little white book that comes with the deck. So you don't necessarily need to buy the guidebook. But the guidebook is actually really, really interesting as well, because it talks a lot more in depth about the cards, and not necessarily just about the meaning of the cards, but the actual process that goes behind creating these specific cards, which I always appreciate. So this is the Soma Tarot. And the last deck that I want to talk about today, and it's a deck that basically asks us to accept the mistakes that we've been making in the past. But this one is more concerning the soul. It's the Death Doula Oracle. I think this deck was out of print for a while, then it got reprinted. In any case, for all of these decks, as usual, you find the link to the websites in the description box below. So if you want to buy them yourself. So this is an oracle deck. It's a very special oracle deck. It's a special deck because it's very intense. When you do find a bond with this deck, you get so much out of it. It's probably very difficult to explain in words, because I can tell you what I feel when I use it, or when I use it for myself or with clients. But you need to have the experience yourself. You need to actually grab this deck, have it in your hands. The tactile experience, again, is fantastic. This is not as buttery as the Soma, but it's very smooth. It's more a papery feel to it, which I really like anyway. The combination of the images on the cards, which is still a photographic deck, but it does use a kind of a collage, but also stacking technique. The combination of the figures on the card and the keywords is amazing. The keywords are very, very intuitive. So you will, let's say it does come with the guidebook. The guidebook, though, I don't find it as helpful as, for example, the guidebook for the energy ecology. But I don't necessarily need it to be, because the images and the keywords help you a lot. They do create a kind of bridge, intentional bridge that you need in order to find the best way to use this deck. So this is really showing you the weight of those mistakes that we made in the past are coming back to the surface. And the weight is, in specific, the weight of the soul. Such a beautiful deck. So this is the Death Doula Oracle. And this was, let's say, these decks, I use them whenever I want to accept that the mistakes that are going to come to the surface during these 3 weeks will be the mistakes that I've actually made in the past. This was my way to show you how I deal with Mercury retrograde, and I use tarot in such a way to help me navigate through these hard times. I always appreciate your comments, because, and if you've been commenting, you'll know that I always answer. It's one thing that I always enjoy doing. Being on YouTube for me means being in touch with the tarot community, and I really enjoy doing that. So let me know what you think about these decks, and also let me know if you have different ways to face Mercury retrograde. How do you survive? Because I use these decks, but there could be different ways, and any kind of help you can send through, any kind of, you know, good energy or good vibes you can send through is more than welcome. So thank you so much for staying with me until the end of the video. Please consider liking and subscribing. It really helps a lot to grow my channel in order for me to be able to be even more in touch with you. More to come. Have a great day.